You should have just signed the damn paper, Alina. This could have been so much easier. That voice belonged to my own flesh and blood, my older sister, Victoria. Right at that moment, I was pinned against the blood-smeared hardwood floor. My throat was crushed between the rough, calloused hands of my brother-in-law. My left shoulder screamed in agony, completely dislocated from where he'd driven his knee into the joint. And Victoria. She just stood there, arms crossed, watching her husband beat me half to death with a blank, dead-eyed stare. All because I refused to sign my life away to cover their massive debts. But what they didn't know was this: right before the blackness swallowed my consciousness, my thumb pressed down hard on the SOS button hidden under the bezel of my tactical watch. Before I tell you how the hell we got here, let me know where you are tuning in from and what time it is in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you believe one simple truth, sometimes the people who share your blood are the most dangerous enemies of all. Fayetteville, North Carolina. 3 weeks before the blood hit the floorboards, my apartment was a bunker. 4 walls of absolute silence. I needed it that way. The Army Medical Corps didn't leave much room for peace, so I manufactured my own. I sat at the glass dining table, stripping down my M17 service pistol. The sharp chemical bite of Hop's No. 9 solvent filled the air. A clean, disciplined smell. Everything in its proper place. The recoil spring here, the barrel there, then the crunch of gravel outside. A heavy V8 engine cut off. The unmistakable low rumble of a Lincoln Navigator. They didn't knock. They never knocked. People who think they own you don't bother with basic respect. The front door swung open, hitting the rubber wall stop with a dull thud. Vicky stepped in first. A suffocating heavy cloud of Chanel No. 5 rolled into my living room, instantly murdering the clean smell of the gun oil. She wore a designer coat that cost more than my first car. Fake tan, perfectly manicured nails. A walking billboard for money she didn't actually have. Marcus lumbered in behind her. A thick-necked, heavy-breathing guy packed into a golf polo that was one size too small. He smelled like cheap beer and stale sweat. Still living like a turtle in a shell, Lena. Vicky smirked. Her eyes darted around my sparse furniture, silently judging the lack of velvet cushions and expensive trash. I didn't answer. I kept my eyes down, slipped the barrel out of the slide, wiped it down with a microfiber cloth. "Brought you some ribs," Marcus grunted. He dropped a greasy foil-wrapped pan onto my clean kitchen counter. Oil immediately seeped out, staining the granite. Bait. Cheap, transparent bait. You don't drive 3 states over just to deliver a $5 tray of barbecue. Next came the real agenda. A thick manila folder slapped against the glass table. Marcus shoved it forward with his heavy palm. It slid right over my neoprene cleaning mat, stopping inches from my disassembled weapon. I dropped the cloth. I looked down at the top sheet. Joint liability. Cross-collateralized loan. Mortgage restructuring. 18% APR. And right at the bottom, a blank line waiting for a cosigner. My stomach turned into a hard knot. They had maxed out every credit card to maintain their suburban royalty status. The Lincoln in the driveway was a rental they were treating like a purchase. The house back in Ohio was underwater. They were drowning in a black hole of debt. And now they wanted to chain my captain's salary and my flawless credit score to their sinking ship. "Mom and Dad bankrolled that fancy West Point ticket of yours," Marcus said, leaning heavily over the table. He dug into his jeans pocket. "It's time you actually paid your dues to this family." He pulled out a lighter, not a cheap gas station plastic one, a weathered silver Zippo. My jaw clamped shut. My spine went rigid. It was Dad's, the one he carried through 2 combat tours, the one he held when he told me he was proud of me. And now it was sitting in the sweaty, unearned grip of a man who couldn't even spell the word honor. Clack. Marcus flipped the lid open. The sharp scrape of the flint echoed off the bare walls. He lit a cigarette right in the middle of my living room, blowing a thick, arrogant stream of gray smoke directly over my clean weapon parts. He was taking my father's sacred legacy and twisting it into a cheap collection agency tactic. A shakedown. "Sign the paper, Alina," Vicky said. The fake sweetness drained from her voice, leaving only raw, ugly entitlement. Don't be selfish. We need this. I sat there in the settling smoke. My pulse didn't spike, my hands didn't shake. I had spent 48 straight hours awake in a dusty, blood-soaked field hospital outside Kabul, ripping open trauma kits to keep 19-year-old kids from bleeding out on a dirty cot. I knew what real stress was. I knew what sacrifice looked like. But to them, I wasn't a combat veteran. I wasn't even a human being. I was an ATM, a walking 800 FICO score. A sacrificial lamb meant to be slaughtered so Vicky could keep buying handbags she couldn't afford. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't offer a single excuse. I just reached out, placed 2 fingers on the manila folder, and pushed it right back to the edge of the glass. "This is financial suicide," I said. My voice was dead flat, cold iron. "I am not signing it." Vicky's face froze. The heavy layer of foundation on her cheeks seemed to crack under the sudden tension. "Excuse me," she snapped, stepping forward. "You heard me. The answer is no. Take your garbage off my table." Marcus's face flushed a deep, ugly red. He stepped up, shoving his heavy work boot against the leg of my wooden dining chair. He kicked it back violently. The wood screeched against the floorboards like a wounded animal. "You're making a huge mistake, you arrogant bitch," he spat, pointing a thick nicotine-stained finger an inch from my nose. "Family takes care of family. You're gonna regret this." He snatched the folder off the glass, grabbed his cigarette, and stormed toward the door. Vicky glared at me, her eyes burning with a venom that went deeper than money. She pressed her lips into a thin line, spun on her heels, and marched out after him. The heavy wooden door slammed shut behind them, rattling the picture frames on the wall. I didn't flinch. I stood up slowly, walked to the door. I grabbed the heavy steel deadbolt and threw it into place. Click. The apartment was silent again. Just the faint, sour smell of tobacco smoke fighting a losing battle against the gun oil. I looked over at the kitchen counter. The greasy foil pan of ribs was still sitting there. Right next to it was my smartphone. Suddenly, the screen lit up. A message notification from Vicky. I stared at the glowing rectangle in the dim room. My chest felt hollow. The steel deadbolt was locked. It could keep Marcus's fists out of my house tonight. But I knew the cold, hard truth. That lock meant absolutely nothing. It could stop physical bodies, but it couldn't block the digital poison they were about to pump into my life. The screen of my phone lit up in the dark living room. A single text from Vicky. No words, just an image file. I tapped the screen. It was a photo from my West Point graduation. Dad standing next to me in his dress uniform, his chest puffed out a massive proud smile, cracking his weathered face. Right across his chest, Vicky had slapped a thick neon red text box. "Dad would be so damn ashamed of you right now." My thumb hovered over the glass. I did not cry. I did not smash the phone against the wall. I just hit delete. Then I blocked her number. The next morning, I threw on my boots and opened the front door. The smell hit me before I even crossed the threshold. Thick, sickeningly sweet, like rotting fruit soaked in cheap vanilla perfume. Sitting right in the middle of my welcome mat was a massive floral wreath, white lilies, the kind you buy for a closed casket funeral. Tucked into the dark green leaves was a small white card. The handwriting was sharp and rushed. "Hope you change your mind before it is too late." A threat wrapped in funeral flowers. I grabbed the wire frame of the wreath, dragged it down the concrete breezeway, and hurled it straight into the metal dumpster. It landed with a hollow thud. Sunday night, 8 p.m. The phone vibrated against the granite kitchen counter. Caller YD flashed Mom. I let it buzz 3 times. The sound ground against my teeth. I swiped right and put it on speaker. "Yeah." A heavy theatrical sigh echoed through the speaker. She did not ask how I was doing. She did not ask if I had eaten. The Army Medical Corps could have shipped me back in a body bag, and she would have complained about the shipping costs. "Alina." Her voice dragged, dripping with fake exhaustion. "I am just so tired of all this drama. I really am." "Then tell your golden child to pay her own bills." "Family helps family." She snapped back, the exhaustion vanishing in a second. "Your father would be sick over the way you are acting. It is just a piece of paper. Just sign it and keep the peace." I am not carrying a 50 grand loan at 18% so she can keep leasing a luxury SUV. I said no. Another long, jagged sigh, then the killer line. Why do you always have to make things so complicated, Alina? Complicated. That single word acted like a crowbar. It pried open a locked steel box in the back of my brain. Suddenly, I was 19 again, standing at the top of the polished oak staircase in our old house in Ohio. Vicky was screaming, her face red and twisted over some petty garbage. A shirt I supposedly ruined. A perceived slight. It did not matter. What mattered was the sudden violent shove. Her two palms slamming hard into my chest. My boots slipped on the hardwood. I fell, tumbling backward into empty air. I remember the sickening crunch of the oak steps against my ribs, my head slamming against the wooden banister, and then the bottom landing. A loud, wet pop. My left shoulder tore out of the socket. Blinding, white-hot pain swallowed my vision. I laid on the floor, gasping like a dying fish, clutching my useless, dangling arm. But the real damage did not happen on the stairs. It happened 10 minutes later. Sitting in the passenger seat of Mom's rusted Chevy Malibu on the way to the ER. I was sweating through my shirt, biting my lip until it bled to keep from screaming. Mom did not reach over to stroke my hair. She did not tell me it would be okay. Her hand shot across the center console and grabbed my right arm. My good arm. Her fingernails dug deep into my bicep, pinching the skin like a pair of pliers. Her eyes were wide, frantic, terrified. But not for me. Listen to me, she hissed, her breath smelling of stale coffee. You tripped. You were clumsy and you fell down the stairs. Do you hear me? You are not ruining your sister's college track scholarship over an accident. You fell. My body was just collateral damage, a minor inconvenience on Vicky's road to perfection. I blinked. The dark living room in Fayetteville snapped back into focus. A deep phantom ache throbbed in the joint of my left shoulder. I reached up, rubbing the thick muscle through my cotton shirt. I had packed bullet wounds with gauze. I had patched up Marine's missing limbs in the sandbox. But that shoulder, my own mother, had never once asked if it healed right. Alina, are you even listening to me? I stared at the glowing phone. She did not care about the truth. She only cared about the illusion. I reached out and pressed the red button on the screen. Call ended. I held the power button down until the screen went entirely black. No more calls, no more guilt trips. I was done bleeding out for people who complained about the stain it left on their rug. If you are listening to this and you know exactly how it feels to be the scapegoat in your own family, I need you to do something for me right now. Drop the words, "I survived," in the comments below. Let me know I am not the only one who had to cut the cord to save my own life. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to hear what happens next. I stood up from the counter and walked into the pitch-black living room. I did not turn on a single light. I stepped up to the front window. With 2 fingers, I slowly separated the cheap plastic blinds. Outside, the orange glow of the street lamp cut through the cold night air. Parked right across the street, half hidden in the shadows, was a massive block of black steel, the Lincoln Navigator. The headlights were dead, but the exhaust pipe was puffing thin clouds of white smoke into the dark. The engine was idling. Marcus was out there, watching. Tuesday morning, 0500 hours. The coffee was black and burned my throat going down. Just the way I needed it. I strapped on my boots, pulled the laces tight, and walked toward the front door. My boot stopped an inch from the threshold. A piece of torn notebook paper rested on the floorboards, slipped right under the heavy steel deadbolt. A physical breach of my perimeter. I crouched down. I did not touch it with my bare hands. I leaned in and read the jagged, rushed handwriting. Family is forever. Do not make a mistake. Vicky's handwriting. The entitlement was sickening. They actually thought a cheap mafia threat would make me fold. I grabbed a pair of tweezers from my medical kit, lifted the paper by the corner, and laid it flat on the granite counter. Tuesday afternoon. The North Carolina sun was baking the asphalt of the base parking lot. I walked toward my truck. My eyes naturally scanned the area, a habit you pick up when you spend a year looking for disturbed dirt on desert roads. Everything looked clear, until I got within 10 feet of the hood. There was a second piece of paper, jammed hard under the rubber lip of the driver's side windshield wiper, but it was not just randomly placed. My dad had stuck a decal on the bottom corner of that glass 2 years before he died. A faded simple circle that read, "Proud Veteran." He slapped it on there with his thick, calloused hand, stepped back and smiled at me like I hung the moon. The piece of paper was plastered directly over it, taped right over his pride. I stopped. The heat radiating off the blacktop seemed to vanish, replaced by a cold, hard spike of absolute fury in the center of my chest. I stepped up to the glass. "You are not as tough as you think." Marcus? He probably thought he was being clever, slinking around a military base parking lot like a stray dog. He took the one pure thing I had left of my father, and he spit right on it. I did not rip the paper off. I did not crush it in my fist. I stood perfectly straight. I pulled out my phone, snapped 3 high-resolution photos of the placement, and then used the tip of my car key to slide the note free without smudging the ink. They wanted a reaction. They wanted to see me sweat. I gave them nothing. 1 a.m., Wednesday. The apartment was dead silent. I was asleep, but my brain was still running on a low-grade tactical hum. It started as a vibration in the floorboards, a heavy rhythmic throb. I opened my eyes, stared at the dark ceiling. Outside, a deep, guttural growl broke the quiet of the street, the unmistakable idle of a massive V8 engine. I rolled out of bed. No lights, no sudden movements. I kept my weight on the outside edges of my feet, moving silently across the hardwood floor until my back was flat against the wall next to the living room window. I used 2 fingers to barely part the edge of the plastic blinds. There it was, parked directly across the street, half swallowed by the shadow of a large oak tree, the black Lincoln Navigator. The headlights were completely dead, but thick white smoke pumped steadily from the exhaust pipe into the cold night air. The engine was running. Behind the steering wheel, a dark, heavy mass shifted. The brief orange cherry of a cigarette flared in the dark cabin. Marcus. Any normal civilian would panic. They would grab their phone, dial 911, and wait for a tired patrol cop to show up 20 minutes later. But I knew how the system worked. I knew the local police would not do a damn thing. Unless there was a broken bone or a pool of blood on the pavement, to them, it was just a domestic dispute. They would shine a flashlight, write a useless report, and drive away. And Marcus would know he got to me. I let go of the blinds. I did not reach for my phone. My brain automatically shifted gears. The OODA loop kicked in. The core of every survival and combat scenario I had ever been trained for. Observe, orient, decide, act. I stepped back into the pitch-black hallway. I unzipped my tactical go bag. My fingers found the heavy, solid shape of my military-issue infrared binoculars. I walked back to the window. I did not stand in the open. I crouched low, resting my left elbow hard on the wooden sill to completely kill any muscle tremor. I pressed the cold rubber eye cups tight against my face and powered on the optics. The dark street exploded into sharp, neon green clarity. I could see everything. I saw the thick sweat on Marcus's forehead. I saw his heavy jaw chewing on the filter of his cigarette. I panned the lenses down to the front bumper. The license plate numbers stood out like glowing white beacons against the dark metal. I checked my watch. 1:12 a.m. I grabbed a notepad and a pen from the table. Subject: Marcus Best. Vehicle: black Lincoln Navigator. Plate: Ohio. Tag: JRM4092. Arrival: 0108 hours. He sat out there for 45 minutes, chain-smoking, staring at my dark windows, thinking he was the apex predator waiting for the rabbit to bolt. He had no idea he was just the target in a surveillance dossier. At 1:57 a.m., he finally dropped the vehicle into gear and rolled away into the dark. Departure: 0157 hours. I closed the notebook. The next morning, the sky was bleeding a pale, cold gray. I stood in my kitchen wearing a pair of blue nitrile medical gloves. I picked up the note from the floor. I picked up the note from the windshield. Zip. The plastic teeth of the heavy-duty Ziploc bag sealed tight. I used a thick black marker to write the date, time, and location on the outside of the plastic. 2 bags, 2 pieces of hard physical evidence. I pulled off the gloves, threw them in the trash, and walked out the front door. The cold morning air bit at my face. I opened the door of my truck and tossed the plastic bags onto the passenger seat. I cranked the ignition. The engine roared to life. I did not need the local cops. Cops wait for a crime to happen. I needed legal firepower. I needed a lawyer who operated with the exact same cold, calculated brutality that the military taught me. And I knew exactly who held that cannon. The law office of Chloe Vance did not smell like justice. It smelled like stale black coffee, sharp floor wax, and the metallic ozone from an overworked laser printer in the hallway. I sat in a high-backed leather chair across from her heavy mahogany desk. My spine was perfectly straight. My knees were shoulder-width apart. I did not lean back against the cushions. Chloe Vance did not offer me a glass of water. She did not offer a box of tissues or any fake sugary sympathy. She simply sat there staring down at the clear Ziploc bags resting on her desk blotter. Inside the plastic were the threat notes. Beside them sat my handwritten surveillance logs detailing the movements of the black Lincoln Navigator. Chloe picked up her ceramic coffee mug. She took a slow, deliberate sip. Her eyes were sharp, dark, and utterly devoid of pity. They looked like scalpels, ready to cut through a layer of diseased fat. "The local police will not do a damn thing, Alina," Chloe said. Her voice was flat and hard. "You call dispatch, they will send a tired patrolman. He will look at Marcus, he will look at you, and he will write the whole thing off as a domestic dispute, a civil matter between relatives." "He parked his engine outside my bedroom window for an hour at 1 in the morning, I said. "And he did not break a pane of glass. He did not raise a physical fist. In the eyes of the county law, he was just a guy sitting in his car on a public street." I stared at the heavy leather-bound law books lining the shelves behind her head. A bitter taste coated the back of my tongue. I was paying $300 an hour out of my own pocket to sit in front of a complete stranger. And yet this cold, calculating stranger was the only person on earth actually trying to protect my life. My own sister wanted to bleed my bank accounts dry to fund her fake suburban royalty lifestyle. My own mother wanted me to shut my mouth, take the abuse, and keep the peace. Chloe Vance just wanted to build a steel cage for them. "So what is the actual play?" I asked. Chloe leaned forward. She tapped her manicured fingernail against the plastic Ziploc bag. A sharp clicking sound. "We bait the trap. Civil courts require a massive mountain of evidence to grant a permanent restraining order. We need clean audio. We need high-definition video. We need clear, undeniable physical trespass. If they cross the line and breach your property, we need to make sure their defense lawyers have absolutely zero oxygen to breathe in the courtroom." I understood the objective. It was not a request for a favor. It was a tactical directive. "Get a camera system," Chloe ordered. "Independent cellular uplink, remote cloud storage, absolutely no local hard drives that they can smash with a baseball bat. Build a perimeter." I stood up. I gave her a single firm nod. "Consider it done." I did not drive back to the military base. I took the highway straight to a commercial electronics supply warehouse on the industrial edge of town. The fluorescent tube lights buzzed aggressively overhead. The long aisles smelled like damp cardboard and cold, sterile plastic. I walked past the cheap consumer junk. I needed professional hardware. I selected a high-definition infrared surveillance kit. It had independent cellular backup in case the Wi-Fi was cut. It synced directly to a secure remote server. I paid in cash. I did not want the transaction tracing back to my primary checking accounts. My sister and my brother-in-law were treating me like a hostile insurgent cell. I was going to fight them like one. By 1800 hours, my small apartment was no longer a civilian home. It was a forward operating base. I moved the furniture. I created clear open lines of sight from the front door to the kitchen. I took the primary camera unit and buried it deep inside the thick green fronds of a potted fern sitting on the living room bookshelf. It had a perfect, unobstructed view of the entryway and the entire living space. I walked to the wall switch and killed the overhead lights. The room went pitch black. I stared into the dark plant. A tiny, cold red LED light blinked back at me. The infrared eye was active and recording. I moved to the front door. I pulled off the standard peephole cover and wired a heavy-duty exterior camera directly into the doorbell housing. It swept the entire parking lot. It covered the concrete breezeway. There were 0 blind spots left. They thought they were dealing with a frightened, submissive little sister. They did not understand that they had declared war on an army captain who spent her 20s learning how to secure hostile perimeters in foreign deserts. The final piece of the defense system was on my wrist. I sat at the kitchen counter. I unbuckled my Garmin tactical watch. I ran a heavy encrypted data cable from the watch port directly into my laptop. I bypassed the standard civilian safety features using a custom macro command. I mapped an emergency protocol to the primary side button. A 3-second press. That was all it took. One long, hard press, and the watch would instantly blast my exact GPS coordinates and a silent SOS signal directly to the county police dispatch. A secondary ping would simultaneously hit Chloe Vance's personal cell phone. A dead man's switch. I strapped the heavy black watch back onto my left wrist. The nylon band felt tight and secure against my skin. I checked the heavy steel locks on the door. I checked the live video feed on my phone screen. Everything was green. The perimeter was completely locked down. I was finally safe inside my own walls. Then the phone vibrated against the granite counter. The screen lit up the dark kitchen. A picture message. I stared at the glowing display. It was a photo of a cheap peeling wooden front door. The front door of my mother's house back in Ohio. Underneath the photo, a single line of text from Vicky. Sunday family dinner. Mom expects you. You better be there. I read the words again. My jaw clamped shut. My teeth ground together. The heavy steel deadbolt on my apartment door suddenly felt completely useless. They were not going to try to break into my fortress. They were demanding that I walk out of it and step directly into the lion's den. I killed the engine. The heavy grill of my truck ticked as it cooled in the freezing Ohio air. 8 hours of staring at the broken white lines of Interstate 77. My lower back throbbed from the drive, but I rolled my shoulders back and forced my spine into a perfectly straight line. I walked up the cracked concrete path to my mother's house. The front door was cheap plywood peeling at the bottom corners. I pushed it open. A wall of heat hit me. It smelled like burnt pot roast, stale carpet, and cheap canned beer. From the living room, the loud, aggressive roar of a Sunday NFL broadcast bounced off the walls. I stepped onto the linoleum floor. The TV suddenly clicked off. Total silence. I walked into the living room. It was packed. Uncle Richard, Aunt Susan, my cousins, Mom Vicky, and Marcus. A room full of my own blood. A room full of enemies. Not a single person said hello. They just stared. Heavy, hostile glares judging my plain, dark jeans and my combat boots. Uncle Richard stepped forward. He smelled like sour cigars and Old Spice. He grabbed my elbow, his grip a little too tight. He pulled me toward the hallway. "Listen to me," he grunted, keeping his voice low. "You are acting out of line. The army made you too rigid, too hard. You need to back off your sister." I looked down at his heavy hand on my arm. He let go. "Men do not like a woman who does not know how to compromise, Alina. Stop being so damn stubborn and just help your family out." He was reducing my rank, my combat tours, and my entire life down to being a stubborn little girl who needed to be put in her place. I did not argue. I just walked past him and into the dining room. The dinner was an execution. They shoved me at the very end of the long wooden table, the wobbly chair near the drafty window. I sat with my hands folded in my lap. My posture was military perfection. Around me, the pack of wolves tore into their food. Dishes of mashed potatoes and greasy green beans were passed back and forth. They reached right across my face. Nobody offered me a damn scoop. Nobody handed me a plate. The message was clear. I was being starved out, isolated. The only sounds were the scraping of cheap stainless steel forks against porcelain plates and the wet, sloppy noise of people chewing with their mouths open. It made my skin crawl. Aunt Susan wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. She looked across the table, completely ignoring me, and spoke loudly to Vicky. "Did I tell you about your cousin Jimmy?" Susan asked, her voice cutting through the heavy room. "He just took out a second mortgage on his house, handed the cash right over to his sister so she could keep her salon open." Marcus grunted his approval, chewing a piece of meat. "That is what real blood does." Susan continued, her eyes burning a hole into the side of my head. "Real family steps up. They do not hoard their money while their own flesh and blood struggles. Every word was a coded bullet. They were painting me as the greedy villain because I refused to be their financial hostage. I sat completely still. I stared at the empty chipped plate in front of me. At the head of the table, Mom sat quiet. She let the pack tear at me. She watched the whole thing. Finally, she dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against her dish. She reached for a paper napkin and dabbed at the dry corners of her eyes. "Alina," she sighed. Her voice dripped with fake heavy exhaustion. "I am just cashing out. I am done. I really am." She paused, making sure the entire table was watching her performance. If your father was still alive, he would be so ashamed. He would be absolutely sick to his stomach seeing you destroy this family over a piece of paper. My jaw locked. My teeth ground together so hard I heard a physical pop in my ear. My father. The man who gave his lungs to the desert air. The man who taught me what honor actually meant. She was taking his grave and using it as a blunt instrument to break my skull open. My right hand shot out. I grabbed my fork and slammed it down. Crack! The metal bit hard into the porcelain plate. The entire table flinched. The chewing stopped. I pushed my chair back. The wood screeched against the linoleum. I stood up, turned my back on the room, and walked straight out the sliding glass door. The back porch. The freezing Ohio wind slammed into my chest, cutting right through my thin cotton shirt. I gripped the wooden railing. I inhaled the sharp, icy air, forcing my heart rate down. Behind me, the glass door rattled open. Vicky stepped out. The door clicked shut, cutting off the noise from the dining room. She held a glass of cheap red wine. The fake victim mask was gone. Her face was hard, angular, and cruel. She walked right up to the railing next to me. "See?" she whispered. Her voice was a dark, jagged razor. "Nobody gives a damn about your rules, Alina. Nobody is on your side." I kept my eyes on the dark tree line. She leaned closer. I could smell the sour alcohol on her breath. "You think you can just walk away? You do not sign that paper. I will make you get on your knees and beg to sign it. Do you hear me?" I turned my head. I looked dead into her eyes. I did not blink. I did not say a single word. I turned around, walked down the dark wooden steps, and headed straight for my truck. 11 p.m. Interstate 77 South. The cab of my truck was pitch black. The dashboard lights cast a faint, cold glow on my face. Both of my hands were locked onto the leather steering wheel. My grip was so tight my knuckles glowed stark white in the dark. I pushed the gas pedal down. The engine roared. Vicky did not scream when I walked away. She did not chase my truck down the driveway. She just stood on that porch in the freezing cold and smiled. I stared at the endless stretch of highway ahead of me. My blood felt like ice water. I knew exactly what that silence meant. The psychological warfare was over. The gaslighting was done. That quiet smirk on the porch was not a surrender. It was the dead silence right before the physical bomb goes off. They were coming for blood. Tuesday night. 2200 hours. Fayetteville. The apartment was silent. I was sitting at the kitchen counter cleaning the optic lens of my service pistol. The cell phone vibrated against the granite. The screen flashed. "Marcus." I swiped the green icon. I did not say hello. "You have exactly 5 minutes to open that door and hand over the contract." Marcus slurred into the speaker. The heavy, wet sound of his breathing filled the line. I could practically smell the cheap whiskey and sour aggression bleeding through the phone. "Or I am coming through the damn wall to get it," call ended. I did not flinch. My hands did not shake. My body recognized the threat and immediately shifted into condition red. I picked up the M17. I pulled the slide back and let it snap forward. Clack, clack. A hollow .9mm round seated perfectly into the chamber. I set the weapon down on the counter out of immediate sight but within arm's reach. I checked my phone screen. The cloud server icon was glowing solid green. The infrared camera hidden inside the potted fern was active. The exterior doorbell camera was rolling. Outside, a blinding wash of white light swept across my closed window blinds. The Lincoln Navigator. The heavy V8 engine cut off. A car door slammed hard enough to rattle the glass. Heavy, uneven footsteps stomped up the concrete breezeway. I stepped back into the shadows of the narrow hallway. I took a tactical stance, feet shoulder-width apart. My left thumb reached over and rested directly on the textured side button of my Garmin tactical watch. Smash! The front door buckled inward. The sound was deafening in the small apartment. Marcus was not knocking. He was using his entire body weight as a battering ram. Smash! The cheap pine wood of the doorframe began to splinter. The heavy steel deadbolt groaned against the metal strike plate. Crash! The wood shattered. The strike plate ripped out of the frame, taking a massive chunk of drywall with it. The door flew open and slammed against the interior wall. Marcus barged into the living room. He looked like a rabid animal. His face was flushed, dark red, his eyes wide and bloodshot. In his right hand, he held a solid aluminum baseball bat. He smelled like stale beer nicotine and pure, unrestrained violence. He spotted me in the hallway. He let out a low grunt and charged. He swung the aluminum bat in a wide, vicious arc aimed straight for my ribs. The hallway was too narrow for a full swing. The tip of the bat caught the drywall, tearing a long gash in the paint and slowing his momentum. I ducked under the heavy aluminum, but I could not dodge his sheer mass. Marcus dropped the bat. It clattered loudly against the hardwood floor. He lunged forward, throwing all 250 pounds of his body weight directly into my chest. The impact drove all the air out of my lungs. My spine slammed hard against the hallway wall. Before I could pivot, his thick, meaty hand shot out and grabbed a fistful of my hair. He yanked my head back, slamming my skull against the plaster. Then came the kill shot. He knew exactly where I was broken. He knew exactly where the old vulnerability lived. Marcus shifted his weight, drove his heavy knee upward, and smashed it directly into my left shoulder. The exact same joint Vicky had destroyed on the oak staircase 8 years ago. Pop. The sickening sound of the bone ripping out of the socket echoed in my own head. Blinding, white-hot agony exploded behind my eyes. My left arm went completely dead, hanging useless at my side. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the floor. Marcus did not stop. He dropped down on top of me, pinning my hips to the floorboards with his heavy knees. His hands thick, calloused, and reeking of motor oil, and sweat wrapped tight around my throat. He squeezed. The oxygen to my brain cut off instantly. The pressure in my head spiked. I reached up with my one good arm, my right hand. The same hand that had basted the turkey for his Thanksgiving dinner last year. My fingernails dug desperately into the thick meat of his forearms, clawing, scratching, trying to peel his fingers back. He just gritted his teeth and squeezed harder. Black spots swarmed the edges of my vision. The room started to spin. Through the fading, blurry tunnel of my sight, a shadow moved into the apartment. Vicky stepped carefully over the splintered wood of the broken door frame. She was wearing her pristine beige trench coat. Not a single drop of sweat on her face. Not a single wrinkle of panic on her forehead. She stopped a few feet away. She looked down at me, bleeding on the floor. She watched her husband crushing the life out of my throat. She crossed her arms over her chest. Her expression was completely blank. Dead. You should have just signed the damn paper, Alina, Vicky said. Her voice was calm, almost bored. This could have been so much easier. Right at that exact second, as the blackness threatened to swallow me completely, my left thumb pushed down on the Garmin watch. 1, 2, 3 seconds. The silent SOS signal locked in. The GPS coordinates fired into the cloud. If you are listening to this right now, and you know the exact pain of realizing a toxic family member would rather see you destroyed than lose their control over you, I need you to do something for me. Type the word "done" in the comments below. Show me I am not the only one who had to fight a war in my own living room. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because the trap is about to snap shut. The heavy silence of the apartment was suddenly ripped apart. A high-pitched, ear-piercing wail shattered the night air. Sirens. Multiple police cruisers screaming down the street, their tires screeching violently against the asphalt, right outside my building. Flashes of blinding blue and red lights ripped through the broken doorway, painting the living room walls in violent, strobing colors. Marcus froze. The murderous rage in his bloodshot eyes instantly evaporated, replaced by pure, naked terror. His thick hands suddenly loosened their death grip on my throat. I gasped, sucking in a jagged, painful breath of air. I looked past his shoulder. Vicky was no longer standing with her arms crossed. Her smug, untouchable mask had completely shattered. Her jaw hung open. Her eyes darted